Good morning. I'm Sonia Winter, Acting CEO and Executive Director of the Cleveland Museum of Natural History, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the museum's celebration of International Women and Girls in Science Day. Each of us can think of a person who has been a mentor to us and has inspired us to think beyond our own limited view of our abilities. Sometimes it is just having someone who exposes you to a new idea or profession, simply by being there and doing what they love. Seeing and hearing female scientists and their passion for what they do can inspire more girls and young women to embrace careers in science, medicine, technology, engineering, and math. Highlighting the achievements of women in science is a way to help banish gender stereotypes. Through Celebrating Women in Science, presented by KeyBank, the museum is championing the inspiring work of women in scientific fields locally, nationally, and globally. Today, as we observe International Women and Girls in Science Day, we look forward to the discoveries still to come. And now, please enjoy today's panel discussion.
Good morning, everyone. I am simply thrilled to be here this morning to introduce our panel. It is our celebration of International Women and Girls in Science Day. I want to thank you all for making the effort to get up early on a Saturday morning to come join us for what's going to be a very special program. My name is Maria Teresa Tejada. I'm the Deputy Chief Risk Officer for KeyBank, but I'm also on the board of the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. What I wanted to start off by saying this morning is that I'm a native Clevelander, and I'm proud to have grown up in Cleveland and have spent my childhood coming to this very special place. As a native Clevelander, when I returned to Cleveland about 5 years ago, I had the pleasure of bringing my now 7-year-old daughter to the museum and getting her reintroduced to something that was really important in my formation as a young girl growing up in this city. And what I could see was just how she was mesmerized by what this museum had to offer. And I think when you look to inspire young girls in terms of what the opportunities are, especially in realms that are science, technology, engineering, and math, all of you will now get the opportunity to enjoy that as well. And I think we're all motivated also as parents to give our children exposure and awareness about what stands before them in the future. I'm also here proud to say that KeyBank is the presenting sponsor of the Celebrating Women in Science exhibit. KeyBank has been a big supporter of the museum, also through its support of the Phase 1 Ralph Perkins Wildlife Center project that was rolled out about 2 years ago, and we hope you'll enjoy that as well. But I wanted to now welcome our panel, and more importantly, to start off by introducing Betsy Kling, who will then walk you through the esteemed panel. It is my pleasure to say that Betsy is a very familiar face in Cleveland. Betsy is the first female chief meteorologist in the city of Cleveland. Like me, she grew up in the area and has gone on to do amazing things. She's part of a very special group of women nationwide that have the prestigious Certified Broadcast Meteorologist accreditation from the American Meteorological Society, as well as the seal of approval from the National Weather Association. With those kinds of credentials, you're going to be in great hands today. I also wanted to acknowledge that Betsy has received many honors herself in North Ohio media. She's gotten the Chuck Heaton Award from the Press Club of Cleveland, as well as Cleveland Magazine named her Best of Cleveland Weather Forecaster. Before I turn it over to Betsy, I'll just personalize this by saying, among the things that has inspired me this morning is looking at the diversity of such a distinguished panel of female scientists. I'm humbled to be on the same stage with them. So with that, let me introduce Betsy.
Thank you. So I'm one of the lucky ones because I have a lapel mic. See, that means I can walk around, and I'm used to being on television, which means I use my arms a lot. So if I just start randomly doing this, please forgive me. It's just what I do. I am lucky enough not only to be the chief meteorologist at Channel 3, but I'm a mom. I have a 9-year-old daughter, my little JoJo, who's here. You may have seen her on the news from time to time. I also have a 3-year-old, or soon-to-be 3-year-old, known as Hot Mess. Her name is actually Violet, and we do a lot of experiments in our house, whether we mean to do them or not. Josie's big into science. She loves doing all kinds of sciencey and math things, so we're trying to foster that the best we can. But, you know, as a parent, when your kid comes to you and says, Mom, I want to do this science experiment, and you're like, ooh, that'd be great, except I'm afraid we're going to blow something up. So you kind of have to find a tipping point and a balancing point. And the really great thing is that's where the Museum of Natural History comes in, because they can come here and you have experts, like world-renowned experts at your fingertips, and you can ask questions, and they're so accessible, and you can see so many cool things. So be sure and take advantage of the hair gel and what else. We have all kinds of different demonstrations and experiments going out in the Hall of Animals that'll be really fun. But being a meteorologist is interesting because you have to know a little bit about everything. It's a science of sciences, whereas some of our more specialized scientists that we'll be bringing up on the stage have a different skill set than I do, and it's kind of fun to talk with various scientists to talk about how things line up and how they do something completely different. And that kind of leads you down other paths. It opens your mind to thinking new things, and that's what this is all about. So let's get the panel up there. First of all, we have Dr. Marla Perez-Davis. She is the Deputy Director of NASA Glenn, and she is the #2 at NASA. So if you think about kind of the hierarchy, you have the big boss, and then you have the assistant big boss, and then there's a whole lot of other bosses. She is the assistant big boss, the Deputy Director. And NASA Glenn is the only NASA facility that has a female director and a female deputy director. So we are super special here. It's very cool. She has a chemical engineering background. So she is all about batteries and power and cool stuff like that. So she's fun to talk to, especially when you start thinking that your bars on your phone are going out. What's going on, Marla? So why is it draining so fast? Maybe that app you're running, Betsy. That's what typically she says. All right, up next is Dr. Karen Cooper. She's the Director of Weight Management at the Women's Health Institute of the Cleveland Clinic. Interestingly enough, a lot of people, when they think of female scientists, they immediately think of doctors. But as you'll find out today, it's not all about doctors, but doctors have to learn biology. And you have all kinds of molecular, cellular stuff you get to learn, and that's a really big part of the education process to become a doctor. And you have to keep up with continuing education. So once you become a doctor, it's not like you just stop and go, okay, that's it, let's just cure everyone. You have to keep studying. That's very important. Up next, we have Dr. Hoh, who is with the Lubrizol Corporation. She is a polymer engineer. Lubrizol does all kinds of cool stuff. They'll help you make hair gel in the Hall of Animals, which is kind of fun, I think. But they do a lot with car lubricants and cool stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to sit down and have a conversation with Marla and Kapi, because you guys and your whole, like, you know, NASA space stuff, well, wait, you got to lube this up so everything runs well. So it'd be very, very fun discussions to have. Last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Denise Su, who is here at the Natural History Museum. She is the curator and head of Paleobotany and Paleoecology. And basically, she studies the environments in which animals lived and how they lived in that environment and how they've changed. Yeah, kind of, for it, for the most part? Check. Yep. All right. Totally right. Fantastic. I did my homework. But the bottom line is that you have a very diverse set of women, not only culturally, but also their backgrounds are very diverse. And when you start to talk about science, it's kind of a big umbrella, isn't it? There's tons of different ways to do science. The Department of Physics from Case is out there. I mean, you want to talk about something that's going to blow your mind. Physics is where it's at. It's all about motion. So let's talk a little bit more, not about the science part so much, we'll talk about that too, but about being a scientist. Because I guarantee you, if you go into any number of elementary schools around northern Ohio or anywhere and you say, what's a scientist look like? they'll say it's a white guy with a lab coat and glasses and he's holding a beaker, right? Typically that's what people think. Do these look like white guys with glasses and lab coats holding beakers? Right? It's all good. And we want to get you guys excited to study about science. There's so many cool things to do. And women and girls have a special ability to put a twist on something. And I think that's an interesting thing. How many of you have seen the movie Hidden Figures? I watched that movie, and the whole time I'm watching, I'm like, I have to show this to my daughter. This is phenomenal. It's so cool, right? These women, they were, oh, you could be a secretary. You could do this, stay at home, whatever. They solved all the problems. It was just like, boom, we're right there. So that's what we want to encourage you girls to do. Speak up and speak out and get engaged and be excited about science. What did you each want to study when you were a kid? Like, did you always want to be what you're doing right now, or was there something else you wanted to do? It could be you're shaking your head. No, not at all. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. So my dad wanted me to be a radiologist because that's what he was. And so ever since I was 5, I got a lot of pressure to say, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a doctor. Now, I did like the math and science, so when I went to college, I was pre-med. And my second year in college, I said, all right, studying for these pre-med classes, I'm struggling and maybe getting a B. But all my engineering classes, they were A's. I was getting A's in them. I said, there's something here, right? So I did a self-assessment and said, you know what? Forget med school. Let me go and study engineering and make that my career.
Wow, that's great. Denise, what about you?
I always thought I was going to be a medical doctor as well, because that's what my family did, and all my friends, and all that peer pressure. But I've always loved human evolution. My parents brought home when I was very, very little a set of Time Life books, which probably most of you don't know what it is, but the parents will. And one of them is a book with a Neanderthal skull on the cover called Early Man. I love that book. Now, my parents bought the series for my older sisters. I couldn't even read them. Now, I loved that book. My sister would hide it, the one who's a doctor now, by the way, a medical doctor. She would hide it because she hated that cover. It scared her. I would find it. That was our game. And so I went to college fully anticipating to be going to medical school. I did the same thing. I took all the pre-med classes. And then I had to take a requirement I had to take a class to fulfill my social sciences requirement. And so I thought, I'll go take human evolution. I mean, I find it interesting. I might as well do something I find fun, right? I took that class and I never looked back. I changed my major. I think I told my parents maybe 2 weeks before graduation.
Oh,
by the way. So I applied to grad school. I'm going to New York City now. So that's really how I got on this path.
Marla?
Hello, everyone. How are you doing today? All right, good. So for me, it was a little bit different. I always liked science and math. But when I was like 7 years old or about that age, I got this chemistry kit. And I was amazed by just mixing things, and probably these days I would say, well, that was not a good idea. Mixing all kind of chemicals and see what happened. Some of things were, bubbles. Some of the things would change color. I was fascinated by that. So for the longest time, science and math was my thing in school. I would do very well. And my mom always said, you have to get an education, but she never said what. So it was not until high school that I came across the definition of engineer, specifically chemical engineer. And at that moment, I decided that I was going to be a chemical engineer, and I never turned, around. So up to this day, chemical engineer by training.
And Karen?
Hi. Well, mine was definitely not so thought out at all. I happened onto human anatomy and physiology when I was in college. I had planned to do nutrition sciences. And that class, when I got into that class, which, by the way, I had switched majors. So I went to the University of Maryland to study nutrition sciences and did not know that there was so much biology, biochemistry, histology, all the different classes that you had to do just to go to the higher level nutrition classes. And I thought, that's not me, it's never been me. I love nutrition, but I'm switching majors. Went to exercise physiology, which I also love. And there were a lot of electives in my exercise physiology major, and so there was one nutrition class that I was able to take without having all the science background. But in the exercise physiology class, major, the human anatomy and physiology course was a requirement. And there, when I had to skin the cat, sorry for cat lovers out here, that was when I fell in love with the human body. I mean, like really from that standpoint of seeing the muscle, seeing the fascia, you know, outlining everything, and that's when I knew, oh my gosh, I really love this. But at the same time, I still love nutrition so much. So that one course that I took that I was able to take without any prereqs was the thing that made me decide, it doesn't matter what it takes. I love this so much, I can study whatever they need me to study. And so I ended up trying to do a double major, but ended up with a degree in exercise physiology or kinesiology because it would have taken me too long to do the two majors. Mm-hmm. So.
I went to school to be a 4th grade teacher. I'm not a 4th grade teacher. It was interesting because I got into my education classes, and I always give an analogy. I'm big on analogies. It's like when you put a t-shirt on backwards. It looks okay, but man, it feels weird. Something is just wrong. So I had looked around, and I had done the morning announcements in high school, and I thought, wouldn't that be fun to do the morning announcements for a job? And I literally called my parents having that conversation, and my mother's like, oh my gosh. But I ended up having to take a lab science as well, and somebody in my dorm told me that meteorology was this really easy class. Woo, yeah! So I went to Meteorology 101, and the first question that came out of the professor's mouth when he walked in is, how many of you would like this class to be based on algebra? Everybody did that. He said, all right, then I assume everyone is fine with us basing this entire class on calculus. And it was very quiet. And I raised my hand, and he said, you'd like calculus? And I said, no, I want you to ask the first question again. Algebra is way, way, way less invasive than calculus. So we went with the algebra, and I had never taken a lab science that I loved so much. I had done a little chemistry in high school, which I dearly loved, but man, meteorology just hit with me, and it's this whole unknown. Every day I walk in, it's completely different, and that's kind of where I love my little section of the world, is because today is going to be different than tomorrow, the next day, and I have to figure out all the different pieces that make all the changes happen, how they're going to interconnect, how they work together, and what that will mean in a 7-day forecast. Did I have fog in the morning forecast for today? No. Oops. So the whole time we're driving here, I'm like, why is there this fog? Okay, well, we got the warmer advection happening over the cold surface, and the last time we did have the snow. I mean, I'm going through everything in my brain. I can't turn it off. That's my problem. So I ask you, ladies, what fascinates you about the science that you are in? What still gets you revved up? Like, this is just the coolest thing ever. What about your science is so engaging to you, Dr. Su?
Discovering the unknown, I think, is what we all have in common, right? And for paleontology especially, you just really don't know what you're going to find, literally, until you are out in the field and you pick up that fossil, or you find that fossil. No clue. That fossil could change the way we think about everything, about human evolution forever. And to me, that's one of the biggest thrills. You just don't know what you're going to find. And when you do, it's just figuring out how it fits in our knowledge, and it might overturn everything that we know.
Kapi?
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, science, it's about the problem solving. So at work, at Lubrizol, we have lots of issues, and then it's being able to apply what you know and maybe working with other people that have different skills or different backgrounds, and actually resolving that, and then actually helping the business with that. And to me, that's very satisfying. The problem solving, which is what you're learning all the ways in school even now.
Marla?
I'm going to build on the unknowns. how cool is to go to another planet? How cool is to know what's going on in space, going deep space? How cool, to design and build this massive spacecraft that looks so simple, but is so magnificent. I mean, that is what energized me. The unknown, the ability to build something that is bigger than you in many, many ways, but more than that, the unknown. There's so many unknowns, and there's so many things to discover here on planet Earth and space. And it's a building block. Anything that we do for space come out here on Earth. These phones that we have, the one that beep beep, like a few minutes before you start, all of that is, communication, things that we have been created to go far places. So that's what keep me dream big, that dream of going out there. What is out there? Mm-hmm. What is out there? So that's what keeps me energized.
Karen?
I think what keeps me energized is that I'm a physician. I hadn't planned on it. I really just fell into it at a later age in life, and it's just so exciting. There's so much new information all the time, and even though I specialize in obesity medicine, there's information in all different facets of medicine that excite me all the time. And I always feel like I'm playing when I'm at work. I'm playing when I'm coming up with different things that I think might help some person versus the next person and so on. And so it's just the excitement of, wow, I could be really creative, or I could, learn this other thing, or I could do this other thing. And then the idea that I actually get to do it because I'm a physician. If I had decided just to stay within my realm of being a nutritionist, who they're like my right arms, I really need them around me, but there's also some decisions that they're not able to make at that level. And so just being a physician just allows me to explore different options and doors that I would not have opened up. Would not have been opened up to me. So that excites me all the time. There's just so much information, and you could really do anything with it if you want to. You can dream big.
Can I add something else too? How many of you like to do jigsaw puzzles? Right? Okay, I love doing those. If I had time, I would do that during my vacations and stuff. But when I look at what I do at work, it's putting jigsaw puzzles together. So there's lots of pieces, parts that maybe don't make sense, but then once you kind of put them together, or maybe it makes a process, or it solves a problem, that's doing a jigsaw puzzle. So think about that as well with what you're doing now. If you like jigsaw puzzles, there's an opportunity there to apply that with what you're doing at work or for your career.
Do your hobbies, like you said, the jigsaw puzzle, do your hobbies relate at all to your career, or is it completely different?
I think there's elements to that. So like the fact that I like putting pieces together, that's what the elements that I see. Now, if I could do jigsaw puzzles at work, that would be really nice.
But you do compete,
kind of.
Right?
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. But it's not like you have it on the table, right?
Yeah, no, actually, that's actually how I describe what I do, is putting together a puzzle of the past. But I have to go find the pieces first. And there's no picture for me to go off of. So yeah, and I also love jigsaw puzzles. And I love reading. So for me, it's sort of, yes, like what I do is very much reflected in my hobbies, to the point where I think sometimes I don't know that I have hobbies because I love what I do so much that it just feels like it's just fun. And so that's what I do.
Do you have any hobbies? Marla or Karen?
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, so mine, it's a blurred line. It's, I do a lot of exercise. I love nutrition. I love reading. I love traveling. I like doing medical mission trips. All those things that it just feels like it's just my entire life.
I like exercising. For some reason, it's just different to what I do every day. So I like the competition of exercises, I gotta say. And reading. Obviously, reading is one thing that I really enjoy. But not, science fiction is big, but sometimes just, a good book that kind of, talk about what else is going on out there in some other areas, like, history or anything in that, area.
Yeah.
So reading, it doesn't matter what, but reading is something that I enjoy.
So I found tennis. Trust me, I wanted to play tennis as a kid, and I never did. I played basketball and ran track. And as an adult, I'm like, I'm going to play tennis. So I started playing tennis. And the problem is, as soon as I start hitting the ball, and they're like instructing me, because I've never played, and they're like, well, you want topspin on the ball. And I'm starting to think, why is there topspin? Why is topspin so great? If I want a backspin, what about a backspin? And then you start applying all the science to it, and you're like, of course, the top spin makes it go faster after it hits, and the backspin's gonna stop it. And then you're like, oh man, science got me again. Like my brain doesn't shut off, right? But that's so cool because you can apply it in so many different places. How many of you have just hobbies that are science related or that could be figured in as science related? Do you have a hobby? What do you like to do? You just like to play and have fun and eat lollipops? I'm with you. Yeah. You like to bird watch. That is excellent. You know, they have so many different specimens here. Mom's like, yes, we know. Why do you like bird watch? You even got a bird with you here. Why do you like bird watching so much?
I like it because you never know what bird is outside, and you never know what you're going to find. You could find a cardinal, you could find a robin, you could find a hawk. You never know.
That is so cool, right? It's the great unknown. Do you have a bird feeder out at your house? Oh, yeah. And have you had any surprises show up? Every now and again. I work at Channel 3. It's right on the lake, and we can sometimes have binoculars, and we see the snowy owls. That's a really big deal, and there's always people out there watching. Do you have a hobby? What do you like to do?
Study weather.
You like to study weather? Give me a hug. I like you. Yay, that's awesome. Weather is so fun, right? It's so different and everything. Does anybody have any questions also? Let me, oh, thank you very much. Yeah, let's see. Over there, go ahead. Do you have a hobby you like to do? What's that?
Well, I like talking to birds. We'll try to, but none of them answer my calls except for blue jays.
Keep trying, right? Blue jays will answer to anything, especially if you have food in your hand. That's what I found.
And a baby blue jay we saw one time under my mom's car.
That's awesome. Nice. What about you? Do you have a hobby?
Building
Building
Legos.
Legos. We have a future engineer here. What do you like about the Legos so much?
It's kind of like a junior building houses thing, and I'd like to be an engineer when I grow up, just like my dad was when he was in high school.
That's awesome. Good for you. That is so cool. See, you find something that you like, and that becomes a career. You never lose the love of studying the things that you like. Yes, ma'am.
I like building Legos and doing robotics with them.
Doing robotics with Legos? Oh, that's above my pay grade. That's pretty impressive, I'll tell you what. So if you have any questions about any of the sciences that we have represented here or anything else, raise your hand. We'll come around, okay? We're just going to kind of have a little discussion about what's going on. Yes, ma'am?
I like robotics engineering.
Robotics engineering. Marla, you may want to talk to her because Elon Musk put a Tesla in space and, you know, NASA didn't. So we got to talk about this. We got to get this going. Granted, there's a whole moon thing you have over them, but that's okay. Yes, ma'am?
I like looking at the stars at night.
Have you been in the planetarium here?
Yeah.
So cool, right? You just don't know what's out there.
Yeah.
So if you see a little guy in a spacesuit in Tesla, now you know that's there, right? What about you?
I like playing the violin.
Well, that is actually very cool, and I'll tell you why. That is actually scientific, because there's all kinds of physics that's involved in the violin making those noises, right? So sound is a wave properties. Oh, brain, right? Very cool. All right, does anybody have any questions? Remember, questions, who, what, where, when, why, how?
All right, I have something for you.
Yes.
All right, so each one of you talk about your hobbies and what you like. Every single person that talked, there's science, technology, and math associated with that. So, for example, you know, the bird watcher. What about if you come out and design and build this new device that you can see birds from any place, right? What about if you come out with a way that people know when the birds are coming, or things that are not available right now? That's for you. My Lego builders, let's design this habitat that is going to be on Mars or the moon, where we're going to have the astronaut live for days. What about that? It's science, and it's math, and it's technology, a little bit. The musician is all about science is all about math. That's all about science and math. So each one of you, it doesn't matter what is your hobby, science and math is part of that. Betsy said, I have to correct Betsy here about the Tesla thing. I'm not going to let it go. I just can't let it go. Betsy, let me ask you a question. There's only one question for you, Betsy. Only one.
No, I didn't have fog in the forecast.
Only one question. Where did the Elon Musk spacecraft took off from?
Yeah, exactly.
From where? From where?
And where did they land?
From where?
Yes,
From where?
Yes, that would be Kennedy Space Center.
Thank you.
NASA Kennedy Space Center. Hi. Are we switching? Okay, fantastic. All right, so let's talk about being a woman in science because, like I said at the beginning, a lot of people, when you say who's a scientist, it's a white guy in a lab coat with glasses holding a beaker or some kind of scientific instrument. Being a woman in science, now Dr. Su, you and I have talked about this, that you went to do research in China. And talk about that experience when you got off the plane and you get in the field. How were you received as a woman in that?
They weren't expecting me. So a lot of people were just told that American scientist is here. And so when they met me, the comment was, oh, you're a woman.
Good job.
And you look Chinese. That was the other thing. So, so that was basically what I deal with, generally speaking.
Kapi, you grabbed your mic. You have something to say.
Well, I think one of the things, too, is that you'll probably notice you might be the only one or two of women in your classes. That's what I experienced. And again, I went to school a long time ago. So I'm hoping that that's changing now, that there are going to be more women in a lot of your engineering classes. But again, if you like what you're doing, it shouldn't matter that maybe you're the only woman in the math class or whatever. At work, I think it's one where you do stand out. So you got to make sure that you're probably just as good or making sure that you're better to make sure that you're being seen and heard.
And Marla, talk about, being the 1-2 punch of NASA Glenn, both women. Your field is so male-dominated, the whole space side of things and even the engineering side of things that you come from. So address that just a little bit.
Yeah, so both for space and aeronautics, which is the two things that we do at NASA, it's a male-dominated field. We have more women that are coming into the ranks. We do have a lot of diversity within NASA, but still, that's one thing that for all the ladies here, you got to be prepared. But one thing that I said is just don't get that be the goal or the thing that hold you back. Make sure that makes you a better person, that really propel you to be the best you can be. Don't think about that twice. Just think about your knowledge. Don't think about your gender, where you're coming from. That's one thing that I have to overcome. I have a strong accent, and some people still react to the accent. So I can, come to a room, I can open my mouth before anyone said who I am, and some people are gonna have whatever perception, whatever, they feel maybe a little bit uncomfortable about it. Some people are curious, so I try not to be a distraction. So you have to, be yourself. Be yourself. If you know your thing, just don't worry. It's like in the classroom. Everybody's different. I was a little bit of a nerd when I was growing up, so I was a little bit different, but don't let that be, a deterrent. Make sure that you build on that. You are who you are, and you are the best. Don't let anyone tell you anything else. And you can be an engineer. Don't let anyone tell you you cannot be an engineer. I was told I could not be an engineer, okay? Do not let anyone tell you cannot be a bird watcher. Don't tell you cannot be a musician. Don't tell you cannot be a designer, an architect, or whatever. Don't let anyone hold you back.
Yeah, if you want to do something, do it.
Yeah.
And then just watch them fall.
Yeah.
Right? My 3rd grade teacher told me I wouldn't be anything. That's fun. Karen, interestingly enough, a lot of times when girls express an interest in math, science, technology, engineering, they are funneled to biology and medical sciences. And then once they get in there, then they're kind of funneled in, at least this from friends that I've had in the past, that they're kind of pushed towards women's medicine specifically. So in the medical field, there's a lot of competition. There are women in the medical field. It's a little bit more diverse that way and even than other sciences. So talk about that just a little bit, kind of how to navigate your way into that medical field and deal with that competitive side of things.
Yeah, well, fortunately, there are many more women now in medicine than there were before. But when you look at the different specialties, that's where you see more of a gender bias. You'll tend to see more males in surgery, and like you said, women are directed into certain paths. I think you just have to be really passionate about what you want to do and just go for it. I don't think I ever really thought about being a woman in terms of, what I was studying. I just loved it so much, and that's where my head was. But because there are more women now in our field, I don't feel the gender difference so much, in terms of being a physician. However, the perception, like you said, when you think about a scientist, you think of a white male with a beaker and white coat and so on. When I was working in an urgent care center, our radiology tech was a white male, and he had on the white coat. And, the patients, if they were sent to get an x-ray before they saw me, they always thought he was the physician and I was not. And so that's kind of where I sort of felt that. And also when I do my medical mission trips and I go over, to different countries or so on, they're not expecting me to be the physician. So actually here in the US, it's a little bit more, you don't really feel it as much, at least I don't feel it as much, except when you get to certain levels in terms of competition, like if you're putting together a research project and it seems like there's so much competition and it's much more male-dominated oriented than women. But in terms of just the whole field of medicine, more women have been encouraged to get into medicine, and most of the classes these days have about a 51% in terms of women in medicine, and I think that's why the field of OBGYN, gynecology, there are so many more women in that field, primarily because we've been asking for women to take care of us. So, it's interesting.
I go to a conference every year, National Weather Association annual meeting, and a couple years ago we had 600 attendees, so we were very excited. Big number, right?
Yeah. 500
men, 100 women. So that was kind of an interesting room to walk into, right? Because you're like, oh. And there were definitely a little bit of an attitude from time to time when you'd walk in. Oh, like, wait, I could toe up with you. I'll talk to you, no problem. So I think there's a bit of courage that has to go into when you walk into a room, a classroom, or into a situation where you are the only female or one of just a couple of females. And, what advice do you have for these lovely ladies out here as far as courage goes? Where do you get your courage? Where do you draw from to not be afraid and keep your head up and your shoulders back and moving forward? Kapi, you're nodding.
Yeah, I think because the other thing I wanted to add is that don't be afraid to take risks, right? Because I think women tend to maybe step back a little bit and not be afraid to put themselves out there or make a mistake. Recognize if you don't take that chance, then you don't have those opportunities to kind of learn and challenge yourself. The times that I found to take courage is really to say that I'm going to be able to contribute for my company. So they sent me to China for 4 years to build a lab. And again, parts of putting a lab together as well as the team. So that to me was my jigsaw puzzle that I was working on. And then for me, because I'm a polymer engineer, but I actually now work in a division that is mostly chemical engineers. So people didn't see me as having that plant experience. But what I manage right now is getting products out to the plant. Again, the jigsaw puzzle comes into play here. But the thing that helps me take that risk and to have that courage is to say, I'm helping the people in my group and also helping the business grow.
Mm-hmm. Marla, do you have any advice?
Yeah, well, I will say keep your curiosity. If you are a little bit shy and you don't feel like jumping the first time, just stay there, just listen and let your curiosity drive you the question, because sometimes if you ask a question, you feel a little bit better about what's going on, and then before you know, you're there. You're there. So don't think too much about people are looking at you or you're a little bit shy, you don't know if you should ask the question. Just take your time, be curious, be yourself. Just keep asking questions, Because one thing I have learned, you never know all the answers. We never know all the answers. So keep that curiosity going. That will help you.
But if you do know the answer, don't be afraid to
Don't
speak
be afraid
up
to
either.
say it. That's right.
You put it right out there,
That's
right?
right.
Denise?
So I was an incredibly shy person. No one believes it now, but when I was, when I was little, grade school, middle school, high school, college, I was incredibly shy. I mean, I was that student. I don't know if you guys do this, but I would avoid the teacher's eyes because even if I knew the answer, I didn't want to be called on because I was so scared that my answer would be wrong, even though I knew that it wasn't. But I would be really, really scared about that. And so I would, don't call on me, don't call on me, don't call on me. That was me, all through college. And college was when it started to change because I had a TA who actually, I think he did this because he was very annoyed at me because I had a gazillion questions for him during office hours. So, oh, by the way, number one thing you should do when you go to college is always go to office hours if you have questions. Those are professors and TAs are there for. Don't be shy about it. And so I had all these questions. I would go and ask him, and he would be like, well, I actually haven't looked at that yet. And my answer to him was always, but you can figure it out. You're the TA. And I would have these long lists of questions. And so during discussion section, when a student asked the same question I did in office hours, he would turn to me and say, Denise, we talked about that just a couple of days ago. Why don't you tell the class what we talked about? I hated that so much. I remember my heart would start beating really fast. My hands would get all sweaty. But what that taught me was I do know what I'm talking about, that I learned it and I can express it. And I think that was a really important lesson for me. I mean, I wish I knew where he was now to thank him. But that to just have that confidence in your own knowledge. It's like what Betsy said, if you know the answer, don't be shy about raising your hand and telling others what the answers are. And it took me a really long time to get to that point. To this day, I still have to sort of work on that. But it's especially when you're in a field where like paleontology, I'm usually the only woman out in the field, and so sometimes I would have I still have to work on that. But I think it's really important that that you be confident in yourself and your abilities. You know what you're doing.
Karen, where'd you get your strength to keep pushing forward?
So my experience has been always to follow what you love. Following what I loved is what helped me, get into nutrition because I was concerned about the sciences and I never thought I was a science person. Even obesity medicine, which I do, it's not a board certified field. I'm board certified in family medicine, and during my residency, I would say to my attendings, I really want to bring exercise physiology and nutrition into my practice, and they would always look at me and say, that's never going to happen, you're never going to get paid for it, it's not going to be done, it can't be done. And then when I was finished studying, there was, the obesity epidemic and bariatric surgery. That's actually the formal term, bariatric medicine, bariatric surgery, was really beginning to take hold. And I noticed that the surgeons did not have a medical component to their practice. And so as surgeons, they cut, they do their thing. But they did not have someone to do the really necessary work in terms of pre-op, post-op, taking care of the patient as the weight was being lost, the medical situations that were being changed. And I thought, oh, there you go, that's where I belong. And so what I did, after I finished my residency, and I knew what I wanted to do, but there was no one was doing this. I started calling all the major surgery institutes, places where I thought I would want to live, New York, Florida, wherever.
Cleveland.
Yeah. No, that would. That was a fluke. It turned out to be a lovely fluke, but it was a fluke.
It's the Miami of the North.
It is. And I literally called them up, or I sent them emails. I looked for the head of the department, and I said, you have a phenomenal program going on. This is what I want to do. You know, I'm going to be in your area. Would you like to have a conversation? None of them turned me down. Everyone said yes. Even one particular hospital paid for me to come there and, you know, do a whole interview, actually. But none of them panned out because the surgery department could never figure out how they were going to pay me since I was medicine. So, but eventually, they recognized the field was growing so much that they recognized that they needed people like me. And so that's how I ended up at the Cleveland Clinic in 2006.
There is a place for you.
There was a place
There's
for
a
me.
place. You
And
just have to find your place.
Yeah, I would just say follow your what you love. Follow what you love. It will it will give you the courage. You won't even know you're walking the plank. You will not know you're shooting up to the moon. You will not know you're turning the fossil over. You will not know that you're engineering and you're doing different. You won't know it. You're just going to be doing it. Follow what you love.
I always think back to when I was a kid, and a lot of my problems stemmed from the fact that I measured myself against other people. I didn't look back on myself. I didn't measure myself now from myself 2 days ago or a year ago or 10 years ago. I always measure myself against what everybody else was doing. Oh, I'm not doing as well in this as that person. Oh, boy, I'm not doing as well in this. Boy, that person really has it going on. I wish I could be more like that. And I never got inside myself and said, wait a minute, hold on. I'm actually doing something right here. I'm happy. I like doing this. And that's what I would tell you, young ladies and old ladies like me out there, is don't measure yourself against other people, because you're never going to add up to somebody else because you're not them. You are you, and you are beautiful, and you are unique, and you have to look at yourself and keep improving yourself. So tomorrow, I'm going to be a little bit better than I was today. There's pitfalls, don't get me wrong. There's days that you will not feel good about yourself. But then you start to think back a little bit, and you say, wait a minute. Hold on, get yourself out of that hole, keep moving forward, don't measure yourself against that person, they're in a different situation. And a lot of times you don't know the hardships that they're having at the same time. So it's really important when you think about you have a big project coming, or you have a test, or you have something, and you're just, I don't know if I can do it, I just don't know. You just do you. Do you, and do you the best way you know how to do you. And I bet you're going to have a lot more success than you think you're going to have. I guarantee it. Yes?
Question for the panel. Can you each tell us, you've all gone traveling to wonderful places. Can you tell us, each, the most interesting place your backgrounds got you there, and what was special about it or interesting? In particular, Dr. Su, maybe something that you discovered in another country that you brought back to the museum.
So that is one of the nice things about being a paleontologist. I do travel a lot. I do most of my work in Tanzania, and it is actually one of my favorite places to be on Earth. Laitoli is the site that I've been working at since I was 21, maybe, so a long time. And it's a magical place to me because, the landscape is beautiful. Every day is basically a safari. So when you think of those nature shows of zebras and giraffes running, that's us. I brush my teeth in the morning to giraffes, walking right behind camp. So, so the landscape is amazing, but it's also that, it's a site where our prehistory is. The fossils that we find there tell us about our very, very distant past. And that's amazing to me, and I find myself to be, I feel incredibly lucky that I get to go out there every year, be in this beautiful landscape every single day for 2 months, and discover pieces of our prehistory, and to share it with everyone, to talk about what it was like when Lucy was around. And Lucy is well, we have a representation of Lucy here, and what it was like and the environment was like and how that actually changed our evolution and really brought us to where we are today. So to me, I just feel incredibly privileged that I get to do things like that.
Kapi?
Yeah, for me, I've had the great opportunity at Lubrizol. I had an expat assignment in our Hazelwood, England research facility, and then as I mentioned, I also was building the lab in our China facility. And then I've also traveled to France and also Australia, which are probably some of the more exotic locations for our facilities. What I liked about that was you got to see the culture and probably how people are trying to do their business and building in a different country, especially for me in terms of China, understanding the customs laws, which are very different. Trying to import certain lab equipment was a challenge, and it was very different from what we would be normally expecting in the US. And so what I think I brought back to the company was that understanding of how do you try to do the business or try to do the same thing globally and what you have to do for a regional issue. And then the other thing that I liked was kind of building bridges. So people always think, oh, well, Zhuhai Lab, it's out there, we don't worry about it, we're so North America focused. And to me, it was building that global perspective back to the company and being able to do that, saying, no, we need to think about this. If you're going to do something here in the US, you need to think about the impact on the lab in England or in China.
Marla?
Also, it's similar to you. I think the opportunities to go and travel are there. I have been traveling for NASA for conferences or just go and look at hardware. And I think every culture is different, so that's one thing that you always kind of learn. It's a learning experience in many ways, but it's also a teamwork opportunity. And I think at NASA it's a very diverse team, and we collaborate with a number of entities out there. So we are, even if we're not in their countries, we are always learning about cultures, how to improve the teams, and that's one thing that for all the young members of the audience, that's going to be increased. We're going to be doing more and more collaborations. But personally, I think, even traveling is great. I love going other places, see the landscape, learn about the history, all of those things. But nothing exciting me more than going to Kennedy and see the launch of a spacecraft. There's something out there that landscape, the vibration, the feeling that you feel even when you are miles away, that's something that has stuck with me. And every time that I have an opportunity to watch one of those launch, and hopefully all of you have an opportunity one day, even if you watch on TV, it's just a beautiful sight. It's just amazing.
You've talked about your mission trips that you've been on, Karen.
Yeah, actually I'm gonna give two answers.
Okay.
I'm gonna start with my childhood because I grew up in Guyana, South America, which is the only English-speaking country in South America. And we did not have access to TV as a country until like the late 80s. And so it was always about listening to the radio and reading a lot. I read a lot, and so our playtime was outside. I mean, I remember when we had really intense periods of rain. If you're living in the city, there's got to be a way for the water to get out and get to the ocean, and so we had these areas in front of the houses that were called trenches, right? And so it was fine as long as it was a normal level, but when we had severe bouts of rainfall, it would flood. And when it would flood, it would come into the yard. And when it came into our yard, what came along with it was what was in the trenches. Mm-hmm. Often the fish, right? And so as kids, we would run downstairs and we're like fishing in the yard. Like this was the best thing. Not even thinking, oh my God, the water is dirty, it's brown, what's in there? I'm sure I'm resilient to so much bacteria and whatever, just because of those days. And I think that because of that creativity, like we used to play shop and play doctor and play, cops and robbers, and we were always making up a game. And I think because of the creativity and because of the push for reading, because that was our enjoyment. We read the way you look at TV. the way we look at TV now. You know, and so there was always a different world that was being opened up to me, and I think I still bring that to what I do. And so now, in terms of what I do, I think that whole curiosity that came from there, I think that's why I love the medical mission trips. I love going to another country and discovering what it's like. You know, when I'm there to give help, it's not just to give help. I just, you know, like to see what the culture is like and so on. And it's because of doing those trips, again, that I'm back in school doing my master's in public health, because one country that I went to, Peru in particular, taught me that I just didn't know enough. And so I thought, oh, this is an area that I really like. I think I want to delve into it a little bit more. And so I just think that just really enjoying, I think joy is really important also. You know, I was not a top student or anything. I mean, if you ask my mother today, you know, do you think your daughter would ever become a doctor? She would say no in a minute, you know, because that was not my focus. I remember telling her that I hated school. You know, I remember when I was growing up, I hated education. And now I love it. I love it so much that I could do it without anybody paying me, you know. So it's, you have to follow your love, you have to remember about the joy. My trips give me joy, you know, many other things give me joy, but think about the joy also in terms of what you're doing, what you're following.
Do we have any questions? Right over here. It's okay, excuse me. How are you, Kim?
I hear you loud and clear about following your bliss, and you all love what you do. But how do you inculcate, you know, when I was coming up, women really were not encouraged to study math or science or chemistry, engineering. And to this day, I always think that these aren't things that I love. But now I'm finding out as a member here and going to so many fabulous lectures, including yours, Denise Su, that I do love it. Well, how do you start that process, you know, when girls are young? When it doesn't come naturally, when your parents aren't physicians?
It's exposure. That's what this place is about, right? In school?
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's places like this, it's amazing. I remember spending a lot of time in natural history museums, and, you know, my parents just basically let us run with it. And I think that's really important that, you know, when you know, the kids have a question or they express an interest, that the parents just sort of go with it and take them to the library and, you know, help them look stuff up and take them to the museum. You know, things like that, just sort of, it doesn't really matter if you're a scientist or not, right? It's just about encouraging and nurturing the passion that your children have in any subject matter. And, you know, and that's what my parents did for me and my sisters and my brother, is really, they just never, you know, they never really stood in the way of anything. When I said, oh, I find mummies so interesting, what do we do for 2 years? We went to a museum of archaeology filled with mummies in San Jose, like every single month, much to my sisters' and brothers' detriment. They did not enjoy that. But, you know, so that's, and I think that's really important from sort of a parental or grandparent or aunt and uncle perspective, is really just to nurture those interests that the kids have.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it's just helping the child or whoever define their strengths. I mean, I do that at work now, where people say, well, I went to school for this. But I said, okay, think about what you like to do and what you're good at. And let's channel that. Let's not worry about what your degree was in.
Marla?
Yeah, we have to look for opportunities to do this kind of thing. You know, we that have, you know, we are in these positions now, to really convey the message that it can be done and excite the new generation about, you know, the science, technology, and math. So anything that we could do and we should do in terms of making sure that we put the information out there, and then hope that, you know, parents and family bring, especially the younger one, to these kind of activities. So I think it takes the whole village to really make a difference, but we do have a responsibility to our future generation. And I am honored to be serving in that capacity. It is my pleasure.
We do have another question. Do you have a comment to add to that?
I was just going to reinforce that exposure was really important, and also because of where we are in our careers, it is our duty to always have an eye out for someone who needs to be mentored or shaped in terms of a certain way.
Yeah, be open
Yes.
to helping and fostering that relationship. Yes.
I just wanted to comment that I think a part of the equation of all of this, and that especially what the young people need to hear, is not to be afraid to make mistakes or be stopped by somebody telling you no. That when we get faced with a negative, sometimes the reaction is just to back off. And I think that that's one of the things that has caused you all to be successful, is that you didn't back off. You just forged ahead. You said, yeah, well, mistakes happen, and I'm going to get past it. So I was wondering if you would like to comment on that particular aspect of this.
Well, I think it's interesting because, at least in my field, there's some egos that are involved. And I know in all fields there's egos that are involved. So you kind of have to learn to navigate things. You know, when you're in school, you know the kids that are the ones who are the bullies, and you know the kids that are the ones that are a little bit more open to trying new things. You know how to navigate those waters and how to talk to people. So, you know, a lot of my job anymore is trying to figure out, all right, I want to get this done. Now, what steps do I have to take to get that done without making everybody around me mad? So you kind of have to be a little wily and not be afraid to hit a roadblock. And if you hit a roadblock, you got to think around it. That's what I love. Josie, what's the movie where the kid has the magnets and he builds the magnet things? Wait, what? Huh? Yes, Big Hero 6. Thanks, Joes. You're right on it. Yeah, that one. Big Hero 6. That resonated with me. His older brother was an engineer, right? A computer engineer and a programmer. And what did he do? He always turned him upside down and said, think about things from a different angle. That is it. Like, I was like, that's the one. So I was picking Josie up and flipping her over. Think about it at a different angle. Yay. So that's kind of my experience, is you have to not only think around the actual problems that you're presented with, but how to work within the framework of people that you work in too. Anybody?
I would say that I think one thing that women bring to the table is that we tend to be probably more collaborative because we don't let our egos get in the way. So I still have meetings where I'm the only female at Lubrizol in a meeting. And I look around the room, I'm like, oh, okay. But what I bring to the table is that, okay, my ego doesn't get in the way, but what I'm going to do is trying to find the solution and also then work around the table and understand the dynamics to get the problem solved. The other thing in terms of taking risks, I think it's learning from those. If you make a mistake, I usually tend to think back, okay, what could I do differently the next time? Right, maybe you beat yourself for a couple days over it, but then you move on and say, okay, the next time this happens, I'm going to be ready. And I think that's the other thing that we could do in terms of managing that risk, is be more prepared to manage it. Okay, maybe this could happen at this meeting, or this could happen. Let me be ready for both options or several options so that I can know how to navigate.
And
So
look
I
at
think that
surprises as an opportunity, not a failure. That's another thing. All right, real quick. Oh, yep, well, go ahead. Do your thing.
Maybe one or more of you could address this. I have 3 daughters that are very scientific, inquiry, curious, and good problem solvers, but they seem to have a math obstacle. How do you overcome that when you have so much other scientific interest, but you always seem to have to struggle so hard for the basics? And have you overcome a big math obstacle in your science career?
I had to get tutors. So I was in a journalism track program to get my degree in journalism, which is all creativity, right? Thinking of telling a story most creative way, visually, dynamically. And then I'm like, oh wait, no, you can't be crafty with the gravitational force of the earth. You know, wait a minute, what? So that was definitely a big roadblock for me, and I had to get tutors. And it's finding the right tutor. That's the other part of it. You can't get somebody that's going to try and hammer their way down your throat. You got to find somebody who can work within your framework and figure it out. And all it was somebody explaining something a little bit different, and then the light bulb went off, and the curiosity grew.
Yeah, I'll be the first to admit I struggled in 2nd grade with subtraction. And my parents were appalled that I got a D. But I love math. What we did was we worked through it, and like you said, somehow the light bulb clicked with the way someone else presented me with how to solve the problem. And then from then on, it was like, okay, this is how to figure it out, or maybe another way to look at it. That really helped.
But you did have struggles in
Oh, yeah.
school.
I
It
will
wasn't
be
like
the
you
first-
just walked through school like, hello, I'm going to be
No, my parents
polymer
were
engineer.
appalled.
Excuse me, third
Yes.
grade, excuse me, fifth grade, bye-bye, bye. Yes, eighth grade, hold on, yeah, see ya. I mean,
No.
it wasn't like that at all. There were struggles.
There were struggles, yes.
Anybody
How many are
else?
struggling with subtraction?
Anybody else have struggles?
Oh, totally. I'm not a natural math person either. But I think that's sort of the point, is that, we're all good at different things. I mean, some of our strengths are, my strengths definitely was not in math or organic chemistry. I almost failed it when I was in college. And it took my sister coming home she was a few years older, so we were home for the holidays. And I told her I was like, I think I was going to fail OChem. And she's like, how is that possible? It's so easy. It's just pushing electrons. I'm like, what do you mean? And so she sat down with me for an afternoon, and we went through. And then at the end of it, I was like, oh my God, it's just pushing electrons.
I understand, right?
Yeah. And she's like, yes, you are so dumb. But you couldn't get that. We're great friends.
That's sisters. That's what sisters do.
But it was exactly that. It wasn't a natural ability with me. It was with her, and it really just took me looking at the problem a different way than the way I've been presented to me. So it doesn't matter if you don't think you're good at it, you can become proficient at it. I passed OChem. That was the proudest B I've ever gotten in my entire life, by the way.
Marla, did you struggle with anything?
Yeah, I have my struggle here and there. I think, everything that's said, I would stand by that. I think the other thing is for, the person that asked the question is, I asked the question about it is the style, the learning style, which, goes with the tutor and how you go about, it suddenly click and it click forever. So you got to find that magic in there, and everybody's different, so maybe different for each one of them. But the other thing is sometimes they feel like either it's bored or the fear. So if it's those two things, then you have to find out what is going to get them excited about math and what is the fear coming from. Is the fear because they are overachiever, and then that's the area that they're not going to do good? So I think there's a lot of factors, but math is one of those things that when it click forever. You cannot force it. It just doesn't work that way.
Right, because it just turns you off completely. Totally. Karen, did you struggle with anything?
I liked math in terms of algebra, but I didn't like the higher aspects of
girl
math.
speak, yes.
And the prereqs for some medical school is calculus. You had to do that, and so I got the tutor, I got proficient, like enough to get my grade and so on. But then I started when I was looking for medical schools, I looked for medical schools that did not require calculus. Because why? Why do I need to do? And that's how, I got around my, what I would call my math deficit. So really I would say for your girls, in terms of what they need to do in school right now, tutoring and having the right tutor, and as Marla was saying, in terms of what it's a fear, overachievement or whatever, those things need to be sorted out. But then it's also about what are you going to do later? And is it really necessary for your field? So.
All right, last question.
I'm going to add this.
Okay, here you go.
Full disclosure, I went for extra math credit just because I'm one of those that love math. So there's the opposite of when someone doesn't like math and someone can't have enough math.
All right, last question. If you could turn around and tell the 8-year-old you anything about where you are now and how you got there, what would that be in a sentence or so? Give you a second to think about that. For me, it would be not to measure myself against other people. And that becomes very prevalent now because not only am I dealing with other meteorologists having different forecasts, I'm dealing with, Britney Spears or whoever's the pop queen these days, Sia or whoever, and how they dress and how they look and, am I thin enough? Is my hair perfect enough? Does my makeup look right? Forget it. Just do you. That's probably the one thing I would look back on and say, what are you doing? What are you most comfortable doing? How are you most comfortable looking? If you feel good about what you're in, you're awesome. You're going to hold yourself higher. You're going to do your thing. So that's what I would have told myself.
I think I would tell myself, follow what you love and be confident in who you are.
Let's see, I would tell my 8-year-old self similar about, understand yourself, what your strengths are, and follow those, what you love to do. And then also take risks. Because if you don't take risks, you're not going to expand or try new challenges and continue to grow.
This sounds like weird, but I would say to myself, don't take yourself so seriously.
Have fun.
Have fun. I was always so, by the book, and you got to do all those things. So I think I would say, relax. Come on, play.
Karen?
Yeah, my words exactly. Relax, it's all going to work out.
Easy peasy, right?
Yeah, it's all going to work out.
Well, what do you think, ladies? Some pretty cool scientists up here, right? I would agree with that. Well, thank you for coming and enjoying our panel today. You're more than welcome to pull us aside as we're leaving and do all that fun stuff. But thank you. Be brave. Be smart, because you are, and you are each beautiful and talented and unique and awesome. And don't you ever, ever forget it. And if somebody tells you otherwise, you tell them to come talk to me. Okay? All right. Have a great day.